an ironic media production.
Visit us at ironickmedia.com.
I was diagnosed when I was about 14, 15 years old. I was incredibly clumsy. I got made fun of because I was clumsy. I think my family feels bad about that now, but I had surgery all of those years ago. And the surgery now, it's been really great because people are talking about surgery on their feet, but I had it when no one was really talking about it. So coming into the CMT community, my feet, they looked pretty for having CMT. So to understand the whole concept of surgery was tough, but I also walked better because I had my surgery. That was really hard. I would take that as a compliment now. But when you're first coming into a community and you're trying to meet people and connect with people and share stories of frustration or worries, really, people were looking at me like, she doesn't even look like she has CMT. I felt like I had to almost defend myself that I did.
Hello, everyone. This is Chris and Lizzo.
And we're a brother-sister team.
On behalf of the Charcot-Marie Tooth Association, a.k.a. CMTA, we are coming at you.
Coming at you from coast to coast. I live in California, and Chris is in Vermont.
And this is another fantastic episode of our famous podcast named
CMT for Me.
That's right, listeners, CMT for Me. A comprehensive podcast covering all aspects of CMT, the voice of individuals living with CMT, their challenges, and more importantly, their inspirational stories. We will also cover research updates, fundraising, interviews with the CMTA community, board members, branch leaders, CMTA leaders, and overall, an opportunity to spread awareness through the eyes of those with CMT.
Hey, so before we jump into this interview and this podcast, what have you been up to, Chris? I haven't even talked to you.
I know. And sometimes that's good, Lizzo, that we don't talk too much.
Yeah, you're happy you don't talk to me?
Yeah, it kind of works out well. But then there are times I do miss you. But no, I do miss you all the time. Listen to this. I've been working on that annual Cycle and Walk for CMT event. And let me tell you, this is a lot of work, Lizzo. However, I'm grateful to have an event for those with CMT and an opportunity to fundraise. That's right, raising money to support the research so we can find a cure for CMT. Lizzo, I was thinking, is there anything we can do differently at this year's event to have some real fun?
I've been thinking about that too, and I really liked the superhero theme we had a couple of years ago. Remember when everyone wore capes and superhero masks? God, I love that. And remember that photo of Kevin Thibodeau, who it was photoshopped.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a cape and he had both legs up in the air and it looked like he was flying around the vent, Mr. Superhero.
I'm not sure of that costume thing. It was pretty awesome. However, seeing Kevin take off, that was cool.
Yeah, it was. Oh, and do you remember the year I thought it would be cool for you to wear a shark costume?
Oh,
and then get someone else to be Marie and then get someone else to wear a tooth costume and then go like Charcot-Marie Tooth. So we'd get that out there.
Yeah. And we're never doing that. And all I can think about, how hot I would be in that stupid shark costume. No way, sis.
Yeah, okay. We can keep thinking about it. But talking about costumes, this next guest loves dressing up in all sorts of costumes.
Oh, goodness.
And so we're going to play a game, Chris. I'm going to give you some clues and you're going to try to figure out who our next guest is. Okay?
I love it. A game. I'm ready.
Here we go. Okay. This person's dressed up in a foot costume, painted the body all gold.
Oh, goodness.
Dressed up as a turtle for Cooter Fest. Don't ask. Yeah. All this to spread awareness.
Pretty interesting. Let's get going.
Okay. Number one, Weenie is the nickname this person goes by.
Weenie. What? Is our guest a tiny person? Or does our guest love hot dogs? Or maybe that's wiener.
Yeah, I think it's a wiener, but
okay.
This person's not a wiener and not that tiny. Our guest also has boneless pinky toes, like boneless chicken breast is boneless pinky toes.
That's interesting. But I guess if I step on our next guest's toes, they won't break?
No, they won't break, but they might get all squishy and I don't know what will happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's continue.
Okay. This person has a big presence, a squeaky voice, and is very private.
Squeaky? Who the hell are we interviewing? A mouse?
No, not the research mice. We can't interview the research mice.
Okay.
But listen, this person has kids. And when the kids complain of getting sick or, oh, I feel sick, I have a headache, the person just goes, take a little sip of water, babe. Just take a little sip of water.
So Lizzo, no Tylenol or Advil? I didn't even know that water cured every ailment.
Oh, yeah. It's a cure-all in this person's house. Let me just give you a couple more hints.
Okay.
Our next guest daughter has CMT. The guest is energetic, hardworking, competitive, and a really good friend. Last fun fact, which will give it away. This person is a salesperson and brings in research dollars for the CMTA. In fact, this individual sold a flimsy plastic 5-cent bracelet for $20 in Vegas several years back in an elevator. Guess.
Oh, now I know who this guest speaker is. Jeana Sweeney, a.k.a. the J-Dogger.
Yay!
CMTA's Director of Development, right?
That's right. She's the CMTA's Director of Development.
Hello, Jeana or J-Dogger. How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
What are you laughing there?
How am I supposed to do a podcast interview?
It's perfect. So it is great to have you on this podcast. Really exciting. And just to start, thank you so much for taking part in this. We're really excited.
Oh, I appreciate the invite. My cheeks hurt so much. I'm smiling so hard. But it's a true pleasure to be here. So thank you so much
You're welcome.
for inviting me.
So, Chris, Jeana has lived her entire life in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Do you know where that is? No, me neither.
What's so
All I
special
know
about
is
that place?
It's in Pennsylvania, and it's famous for a famous tragedy, the bursting of a dam in 1889 that killed over 2,000 people.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's a steel mining town, right, Jeana?
Yeah, not so much anymore, but it was once. Yes.
And so, Jeana, we have a lot of questions for you, but I guess the first, are you a Pittsburgh Steelers fan?
110%.
Yeah, I knew it.
God, don't start in with that.
Yes,
Okay,
let's just do a podcast about that. Yes,
Okay.
I am a Steeler fan. I live very close to Pittsburgh. I'm 2 hours east of Pittsburgh. And other known fact for you, Elizabeth, we have the world's steepest incline.
Oh, I went to that
Oh,
incline.
yes.
Great. Good. Our listeners are excited about that. A lot of comments coming in over the live wire.
Let's go see the.
So Jeana, listen, let's start, which I think is great, just to tell us a little bit about yourself. We know where you live. Are you married? Do you have kids? We all really want to know your age.
Yeah.
So just give us some background. Go ahead.
As Elizabeth said, I'm not so much private. I just don't like talking always about myself.
Okay.
I don't know why that is. So I will start with, I am married to Chris Sweeney, of course.
Now, wait, you hesitated there. So I'm like,
I wasn't quite sure if I should start with my girls or my husband.
Go ahead.
So I guess I should start with my husband first. We will be married 23 years at the end of September. And
Wow.
we've been together for 25.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I am a mother of two. My oldest daughter, her name is Haley. She is 20 and she'll be 21. I can't believe it, in November. And then I have Rylee Sweeney, who just turned 16 and summer job and is driving. But
that's cool.
Yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's you in a nutshell.
That's me in a nutshell.
Just tell us a little bit about your role as a member of the CMTA. For example, how'd you end up working at the CMTA? When did you start? What are the various positions that you've had, and or what's your current position with the CMTA?
I'll start with how I got involved in the CMTA because I actually started as a volunteer. I share this story quite often because so many individuals in the community are looking for that support or looking to meet others with CMT. And I was probably about 30 years old at the time. I still hadn't really met anybody else living with CMT. And I received a random flyer from the CMTA about support group opening in little old Johnstown. And I thought, what? There's more people that are living with CMT in Johnstown. Like I was just blown away by that. So I didn't even skip a beat. I was excited to go. And I went to my very first support group meeting. And the speaker at the meeting was an old president of the CMTA board, Ann Beyer, Elizabeth, I think. And she was speaking. And she was giving the crowd much information. And I was getting more and more frustrated because I was like, how does she know this? And I don't. I want to know what she knows. So my hand kept going up and she answered all of my questions. And after the meeting, the support group leader came up to me and said, who is a very dear friend, JD Griffith. He said, I think you need to be involved more because you hold people accountable. You want to know there's something in you that I see, and I would love for you to be on my team. And he brought me in as the co-leader, and I started really creating awareness in Johnstown.
JD Griffith discovered you and brought you in because there's a fight about that. Everybody thinks they discovered you. So it's really JD.
It was 100% JD. He actually, before the meeting was over, said, hey, could you hang out for a little bit? You're a little feisty and I like that. And I want to get to know you more. I think that you have a big presence and I think you can do a lot here in Johnstown. So yes.
Jeana, the word on the street too is that you showed up at that branch meeting in a gorilla costume and was running all around and you made yourself well known. Is that true?
No, that is not. I wish I could say it was, but no,
well, we had to put that to rest because that comes up all the time. So what do you do at this, or what did you do at the CMTA? What was your first job?
I volunteered for a little bit before I was asked to come on staff. So I did do some volunteer work, which helped. I laid the groundwork. And when I was brought on staff, I was the director of community engagement. And I got to work with my co-partner, Elizabeth, on so many wonderful things. Awareness Month, patient family conferences. I did fundraising still in that role. I worked with the support group leaders are now called branch leaders. I got to work with one-on-one with them, really just educate the community in every single way possible. But we kept it fun, right, Elizabeth? We kept it fun at the same time, which I think the community appreciated it. And I was in that role for about 9 years, 9 or even 10 years. And then recently, maybe about 3 years ago, I became the director of development for the CMTA.
So Chris, when I first met Jeana, we had a branch leader meeting at a gala and the branch leaders were all put at the back of the room and we're sitting there and Jeana walks in these little shoes and this older woman next to me, she goes, that woman, who's that woman? She doesn't have CMT. No, she doesn't. She's look at her walk. Look at her. And Jeana's there. And she was like wearing a tan dress. It looked like she was naked underneath. And so I was just like, at first I looked at her. I'm like, oh, she is wearing a dress. Okay. And then I was thinking, then I looked at her little pinky toes that are just not, she doesn't have any bones in there. And I'm thinking, yeah, she probably doesn't. She doesn't. Like, what's up with this woman? She was just hanging out with JD. So I didn't know about her at first. I'm like, yeah, it turned out to be a good thing.
Good relationship that you guys have developed over the years, which is great. And so just counting that relationship between the two of you has been how long? 15 plus years, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
About 15, 16. Yeah. It is hard when you look like you don't have problems when you have CMT. Even people with CMT can be quite judgmental. And so Jeana did have symptoms, yet they weren't as obvious as some other people's symptoms. Did you struggle a lot with that, Jeana?
And can I say one thing, Elizabeth, too, just for our listeners? And first, Jeana, just as you get into that, tell us what type of CMT you have.
I have CMT 1A.
Okay. Which is the most common, correct?
Most common.
Which I've learned.
Yes. And my CMT is spontaneous. I have a spontaneous mutation. So it's just me in a family of 6. Before I get into that, along with my dress, I always get in trouble for my clothes. I think I'm a pretty sharp dresser, just in my own personal opinion, but that's beside the point. On to your question, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Elizabeth's question is a good one, though.
Yes, it is. I was diagnosed when I was about 14, 15 years old. I was incredibly clumsy. I got made fun of because I was clumsy. I think my family feels bad about that now, but I had surgery all of those years ago. And the surgery now, it's been really great because people are talking about surgery on their feet. But I had it when no one was really talking about it. So coming into the CMT community, my feet, they looked pretty for having CMT. So to understand the whole concept of surgery was tough, but I also walked better because I had my surgery. That was really hard. I would take that as a compliment now. But when you're first coming into a community and you're trying to meet people and connect with people and share stories of frustration or worries, really, people were looking at me like, she doesn't even look like she has CMT. I felt like I had to almost defend myself that I did and try to find ways that I could give examples of my struggles. So,
so what she did, Chris, is actually she just kept tripping and she would drop stuff just purposely, just so people would know that she had CMT.
Oh,
She
really?
then she'd drop it. She goes, "Oh, that was my CMT."
No, that's not true.
Oh, nice.
But I would even forget she has CMT. We're at a conference. Now, Jeana, people with CMT cannot pour from that jug. Get over there and pour that for them. And Gina's like, what? Like looking at me incredulously and just going, what? Like, I have CMT too, remember?
Yeah.
So sometimes I forget too, right?
Yeah. And we could go on and on about that.
Jeana, I do want to just talk a little bit, which I think is very interesting to our listeners and some of the individuals that we've interviewed is, so you referenced that you were diagnosed with CMT at age, would you say 15?
Yeah, about 15.
15. And how was that diagnosis made? And what led to that diagnosis?
My mom definitely could recognize that my gait was off and constantly going to the pediatrician and my mom sharing her concern with the pediatrician. But it was really my falling that ended up helping getting my diagnosis. I was breaking a lot of bones. Actually, I was breaking a lot of bones from my falling. I tried to play volleyball the best I could. My volleyball coach would constantly, my ankle was just so incredibly floppy and she would constantly try to tape it. It just, nothing worked. And I think that it was one of my last falls. My mom took me to the emergency room again. She finally said to one of the ER docs, there's just something wrong with my daughter and I just I need to get some help. So in Johnstown, my mom took me to an orthopedic surgeon, I think he was, and he told my mom that I had spinal bifida. They said, we don't want to diagnose her quite yet. We'll send her to Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. And I just got so incredibly lucky because the orthopedic surgeon that I saw, we walked into the room and he said, roll up your pant legs, walk up and down the hall, stand on these bricks. I wasn't even there for 15 minutes and he had a diagnosis. Wow. And he said to my parents, this is what I think your daughter has. And going back all that time ago, there wasn't a whole lot of information. And the things that he told me were, Jeana, you can't work. Jeana, you can't have kids. Jeana, you can't exercise. I think that there was 10 things that he told me that I couldn't do. But at the same time, he was a really great doc. He just didn't know. And so I had the wonderful nerve conduction test done. They confirmed the diagnosis. And right off the bat, I had my very first surgery.
Wow.
So I just want to say,
go ahead, Elizabeth.
That don't tell Jeana that she can't do something because she's going to do the opposite. And that's exactly what she did. She was right in this case.
Yeah, I've seen that firsthand, right? Jeana at our annual cycle for CMT event, and there she is loading boxes in a truck, and she is not sitting on the sidelines, which is very inspirational. And she actually gets all of us moving. When we feel tired, she's get going, get off your ass, get doing this work.
Yeah, so, I have CMT. What are you complaining about? Get up.
It's awesome.
I say that to my husband, Chris, all the time.
Yeah. So Jeana, you're painting a picture here, and I just want to better understand how you felt about that. You're in your teens, you're trying to figure out what's going on, you're trying to be active, you're hanging out with your friends, you're trying to play volleyball, you have broken bones, you go in for this diagnosis, and you hear of CMT. How did you feel when you heard that? Because I would imagine it must have been very frustrating. And then all of a sudden you hear about CMT and not at the fault of a doctor, but saying you can't do this. And then you're also hearing these things like, hey, there's no cure for this. And at that age, how'd you handle that?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I think that I remember feeling sorry for myself,
Sure.
maybe a little bit. And I think that it did give me an understanding as to why I was a klutz. And I remember the one time because they told me that I wasn't allowed to participate in gym class anymore. I stopped playing volleyball. I stopped doing all of the things that I loved to do. I remember sitting in the bleachers watching gym class, and I'm like, man, is this it? Like, what's next? What do I got? What am I supposed to do now? And so I think I was very confused, and I don't think that I knew how to feel. And because I didn't have the CMTA community that we have now. And so I didn't know. I just didn't know what to do. It was shortly after that I became a senior and I go to school half day and then I went to work the other half a day. And I think getting into that program helped me because it put me in the workforce and it made me realize the things that I can do. And I actually went to my interview with my second cast on. So I was able to talk about CMT a little bit, but I don't think I even knew how to pronounce it. And they were saying something about bones but it gave me an opportunity for the very first time to talk about my CMT. And still at the same time, I think when I was trying to describe it, I think that I wanted people to almost feel bad for me. It's just, I just wanted someone to listen or get a response. But I was glad that I had that opportunity because I think then it made me into the person that I am today because my boss, he saw me for Jeana for the first time. And aside from volleyball, aside from all the things that were listed that I can't do, well, wait a second, I can work and I'm doing that now. So I think that just jump started.
Yeah. It's very inspirational just to hear your story, right? And how you felt. And I would think that's challenging for yourself, for parents, for friends, etc. And you probably learned a lot about yourself through that. It's very interesting in terms of how you feel that really has had a positive impact on you.
Yeah, 100%. And I can tell you, I felt alone. After I worked at the credit union for a little bit, the first thing that I did is went for a run.
Yeah, you did.
It wasn't the best run. It wasn't the longest run, but I was.
Did you stay upright?
Myself. I did stay upright.
There you go. Progress.
Yeah.
So, Jeana, do you have children?
Yes, I have Haley and Rylee.
Tell us a little bit about them.
Oh my gosh, they're my favorite people to talk about. Haley, like I said, she's going to be 21 in November.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a real joy being a mom. That's one of the most rewarding things about my life, I think. But this is where I always get a little emotional talking about my girls. Haley, in her life, as far as CMT goes, I've never had Haley tested. We've had conversations about Haley being tested, and she knows that the possibilities are there. She decided not to be tested, and I want to respect that. She was mature enough and old enough to make that decision for herself. I gave her a few things that I'm going to step in and make sure that she does get a diagnosis. And we agreed to that. And she's okay with that. But she's had her challenges in her life with scoliosis surgery. And she has 2 rods and 22 screws in her back. Teaching her how to be strong and feel strong was something that I could relate to. And I think that has helped her. And a lot of tough love. But she's an amazing young lady. And then there's Rylee. And there's
a little bit about Rylee.
Yeah. What about Rylee? Tell us some more.
Rylee, she, like I said, she just turned 16. And Rylee I know that there are so many strong kids out there. And I know Rylee is mine, but she is one of the toughest little girls that I have ever met and ever will meet. And at the same time, she has a spirit behind her and a kindness and a compassion that is very genuine. So when Rylee was born, she was born with something called pulmonary lymphangiectasia. It has nothing to do with her CMT. It's aside from her CMT.
So that was one thing, just to interrupt, because for our listeners, so she has CMT.
Yes.
And does she have 1A?
Yes, Rylee has 1A.
Okay. So continue on.
So when Rylee was born, she was born with pulmonary lymphangiectasia, and it's your lymphatic tissue around your lung. To make a long story short, she could take a breath in, but she could not get the whole breath out. So it's like a moisture on a window. Some of the air is going out, but it's leaving that moisture. So that's what was happening, but it created wet lung for Rylee. Mm-hmm. So it was pockets of fluid all through her lungs. So I fought very hard for Rylee. They missed it. They let us go home. Let me back up. I'm sorry. This is very hard for me to talk about this. With pulmonary lymphangiectasia, it's very rare. So it's either the infant is stillborn or they die within the first 8 weeks of life. So it's very rare. I think maybe they're starting to know a little bit more about it, but to be honest with you, I don't Google very often. Where was I? I'm sorry.
Well, so she was diagnosed. Did she stay in the hospital for a little while? And then you brought her home and you had to be careful about germs and stuff because of her breathing?
Yeah. So by the time she got a diagnosis, we left the hospital, went back. And then finally she was diagnosed through a lung. And we were there for about 3 months, just Rylee and I at the Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh. And with pulmonary lymphangiectasia, there's a lot of other genetic conditions, disorders, diseases, the list goes on. So they did full genetic testing on Rylee. And when we brought Rylee home, her very first follow-up from the doctor, we went in and he handed me a paper and said, your daughter has an extra copy of her PMP22 gene. She does have Charcot-Marie tooth. And at the same time, I'm trying to deal with this like massive lung disease. And that's when I said, oh, hell, I'll keep it PG. So that's what I said to myself. I thought, well, I have to do one thing at a time. And to your point, Elizabeth, for the first full year of Rylee's life, we had to quarantine her. Nobody was in, no one was allowed in, and no one was allowed out. The only person that really spent any time in the home was my mom, going through CPR classes. And that's something that I had to go through. And that was a really tough time for my family. Plus, I had a 4.5-year-old that I was trying to be a mom to at the same time, trying to keep my baby alive. And
so that's a lot, Jeana. That's a lot to have that diagnosis of CMT and then to have this other pulmonary problem. So let's fast forward a little bit. How do you handle it? That's just that you have CMT yourself. Your child has CMT and the other one, and the full first year is focused on Rylee. And then when did Rylee start? Some people with CMT, when they don't even have symptoms until like they're in their 20s. So does she have symptoms and what does that look like?
Yeah, so Rylee started really showing signs of CMT when she was about 3. So right when I was starting to see symptoms of her CMT, and I did talk to some neurologists in the CMT community because I had that relationship and they hadn't really seen Rylee yet. They said, Jeana, maybe it's because of CMT. Well, regardless if I know CMT or not, I was seeing it. And that's what I kept thinking in my mind. And I'm seeing it. When she started really showing signs, she got very sick. And then I had to life flight her to Children's Hospital from Johnstown Children's Hospital. So there was another like hiccup in that. And when we got back from the hospital, I thought, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to start really concentrating on her CMT. And I took her to see Dr. Mike Shy. And he was in Detroit at the time. I really needed to make her CMT a focus, not like in a scary way for Rylee or for myself or for Chris, but just to help her manage it and stay on top of it. As her mom, being that I did know that she had CMT at such a young age, she was only maybe a month or 2 old, I was able to direct Rylee into a way of living and mold her, help mold her, if anything, not push her, but mold her. Hey, Rylee, how about we go swimming? You could join the swim team. Hey, Rylee, how about playing the piano? Hey, Rylee, participating in plays, setting her up to succeed and enjoy the thing.
And that's great, Jeana. What are her symptoms today?
Oh, the biggest thing that Rylee has to deal with is dislocations of her knee. We have been trying to manage that. The dislocations of her knee, which she had surgery, which I'll talk about in just a second. But also for those listeners, and Elizabeth, you know this, and Chris, if you've seen Johan, Rylee, when she runs, it's like in her mind, she is running as fast as a cheetah. And she's like running, but she is going as slow as a snail. And that breaks my heart. Like it just, and the way that she runs, it's so incredibly sad to see for me as her mom. But Rylee just had her first surgery May 25th on her knee.
And it's unusual. I mean, I hear about knee dislocations and I hear a lot about foot surgery, but I don't hear about a lot of knee surgery. So what was done?
Yeah. And it's funny because I've talked to more and more people about knees, and I think it's more common than what people realize. It's definitely more common. So from what I understand is because of the way that Rylee walks on her foot. I always walk on the outer part of my foot. Rylee walks on the inner part. I sprained my ankle all the time. Rylee is dislocating her knee. So she was not using her whole thigh to walk. She was using her outer part of her thigh to walk and not her inner part. So her inner part started atrophying, and that led into the muscles and the ligaments of the dislocations of her knee.
Okay. So she had surgery to do what?
Rylee's kneecap sat a little bit higher, but Rylee probably had about 35 to 40 dislocations in about 4 years. And they were really severe, really very painful. And every time I heard that screech or that yell, I knew exactly what happened. But here's Rylee. Out of all those times, except one, she put the kneecap back in.
Really?
Yes. Every time. So they removed the kneecap at first. And I guess from severity, it's 0 to 4. Rylee's kneecap was a 3 as far as like the cartilage. So they had to clean off the cartilage, reposition the kneecap because it was stuck in one spot because of all of the dislocations. Then they took cadaver. I always say that wrong. Cadaver tissue. And they strapped it over the kneecap to secure it. And then they did a whole realignment of her leg.
She's been through a lot. You've been through a lot. I think it's very obvious based on your strength and being positive, right? You have passed that down to your children, which is very amazing. And in one area I do want to explore, and I was really trying to think of how to get to this point, but before the kids, you have a husband and his name is Chris. So I think a little bit about he must be an incredible individual. And when did you guys meet? What age did you and Chris meet?
I think I was about 24.
Okay, so you're 24. And what I do think about, which is very, again, positive, is that there are definitely some people that would meet someone that has CMT and say, okay, hey, yeah, you're great, Jeana, but nah, marriage isn't in the cards for us. So he must be a very special person, which I would think sees you for who you are and can look beyond that, which is awesome. So I wanted to learn a little bit about that because maybe you thought as you were starting to date, did you have any feelings like, boy, no one's going to want to date me? Oh my God, I don't even know if I'll ever get married. I don't even know if I'll ever have kids. And geez, if I do want to have kids, I'm going to have to think about, are they potentially going to have CMT? So I'm really curious on individuals, how that kind of relationship starts, the openness, and then followed by the discussion of should we have children or not? So can you tell us a little bit about that phase of your life?
Yeah. So I was very scared to tell Chris. And something that you hit on, Chris, is I did have people not call me back after I told them I had CMT.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Hurts,
those are just the facts. I can imagine.
It did hurt. And I'm 23 years old. And I may not be the most beautiful person, but I'm not
So I will
terrible.
put for our listeners, because no one can see. So Jeana, for our listeners, is a beautiful woman, very outgoing. And I would think you would have had guys beating on your door to take you out on a date, right?
Yeah. Thank you for the compliment, Chris. But so I had 2 or 3 conversations with men, I'll call them boys, about my CMT. I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I was really trying to be honest. And there's a story for another time when I first realized I actually had CMT. Yes, I had CMT, but it was in front of a guy. Huh. I was scared and I didn't know how to process it. And he's looking at me like, what is going on with you? I never heard from him again. and 2 other guys. It was a big deal. I made lasagna and I was like, okay, I'm going to make dinner because I was on my own already.
And were your hands? So did they leave because you spilled sauce all over them and everything as you're trying to feed them dinner?
No, I said, well, hey, I just want to let you know I have this, I always call it a thing. I have this thing called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. I mean, it affects my feet. So I was trying to explain it. And then after they left, I never heard from them again. Crazy.
What's different with Chris?
He loved me.
Awesome.
He loved me.
Yeah, you can just tell.
Yeah, he loved me. And he saw me, to your point, Chris, for me. And I was very scared. Needless to say, I did not make lasagna. I did not make him dinner.
They just went out to a restaurant every night since.
Going into the conversation, it was the same thing because I have to be me. And I always am me. When I told him, but it was like, no matter what happens with your feet or no matter what happens with you, I will love you because I love you. And a couple of months later, Chris and I moved in together and I woke up in the middle of the night. I think it was like within the first week we were living together. I woke up in the middle of the night, hopped out of bed. And for those listeners that have CMT, I got 2 Charlie horses on steroids in both of my legs. And they hurt very badly. So I jumped out of bed. I don't know, the street light or something was coming in from the window and Chris saw my shadow and I'm walking to the wall just to get stretched out. And I heard, run, Forrest, run. And I knew at that moment that this was the guy that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with because he was in that moment with me. Yes, it was, and he wanted to make me laugh. He wanted me to feel comfortable with what was happening and take my mind off of it. So yeah, I'll never forget that.
And that's great. You've referenced twice. So it's important, it sounds, to someone like yourself and or others with CMT for people to see you for who you are. As you said, your boss was able to see it's Jeana, right? Jeana for who I am. Chris was able to see, hey, I love this woman regardless of her CMT. And that is really incredible. So now I think, okay, so you get married. And what's it like? Are you sitting around the table when you're starting to think about having kids? And what's that whole discussion that you have with one another, knowing the potential outcome of passing on your CMT?
This is the tricky part, is because I wasn't really educated properly on CMT. I didn't know the full extent of that. So there was no conversation. It was, we're going to have a baby. I really wasn't educated on CMT at the time. Going in then and talking about having Rylee or having another baby, I think that I was trying to get more and more information on CMT. And I think I had maybe a little inkling it was going to possibly be the case, but I wanted to be a mom. I wanted to be normal in my own right. Chris saw me for that. And so it wasn't necessarily a big discussion that we had.
Oh, good. Good. And it sounds like you have 2 beautiful daughters. So yes, very beautiful daughters. And I couldn't be more proud of them both. And Rylee definitely showed more of her strength with this past surgery than she's ever before. Lizzo, what's on your mind over there?
Just Jeana is such a passionate advocate for people with CMT, even before she was an employee. Jeana, what makes you so passionate about the CMTA and the community and the cause? What makes you tick?
The CMTA, I'm passionate because it affects me and my family. And I talk to people all the time and they say, selfishly, I'd like to fundraise. Selfishly, I'd like to donate. And I think that they feel bad about that. But we're all in it for selfish reasons. We all want what's best for our family. And I will do anything, just like any other parent. I will do anything for Rylee. And I think, too, I made a promise to Rylee when I found out she had CMT because there was nothing for pulmonary lymphangiectasia. There was nothing for CMT. So which way am I going to go? And I went the CMT route because I knew what the CMTA was doing.
How do you feel about your symptoms now? I know that you've had some increased symptoms with your CMT, your hands and your feet. And so are you doing it for yourself and for Rylee and for probably all the people that you've gotten to know? as I get involved in the community, and we both have been involved for a very long time, I start getting a little down when I see all the effects that CMT has on people. And we learn more about breathing and scoliosis and all this stuff and hearing loss. And I start getting down, and I want that research to go faster. But like you just said, what choice do you have? Either you sit down and give up. I see it in black and white, or you stand up and get going and you do as much you can for your kids and for yourself and for the community.
110%. 110%. I wouldn't not, if you would have asked me that question maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said, all for Rylee, all for Rylee, all for Rylee. But I do it for me too. I do it for my grandkids. I want to be strong. And not that I'm not, I'm stronger in other ways. But as my CMT progresses, I think that it reminds me more and more as to why I'm in it and why I want it.
And Jeana, I think as we're getting close to wrapping up the podcast, there's a few questions that I think about is just, in your own words here, how important is CMT research and to ultimately find a cure?
How important? I don't think that I can find one word as to describe how important it is. People that have been living with CMT for a while, like myself, I see all of the advances and I see all of these amazing things, the new diagnosis, they come in. Where's the research? Look at what we have done. Look at where we're going. But Chris, I can't think of one word that really describes how important the work that the CMTA is doing.
In closing, what advice, Jeana, would you give a parent whose child was just diagnosed with CMT? You have navigated through so much, and you're an incredibly positive individual, right? With everything that's on your plate, work, juggling a family with CMT, your own CMT. But what advice a parent who, whether it's a spontaneous mutation, finds out that their child has CMT?
I tell people all of this all the time is that you're not alone. Utilize your resources. You have to educate yourself on CMT, and you're not alone. Reach out. There's an entire community of people that are just like your son, your daughter, yourself, whoever it may be. Get involved and do something, because I think that what has really helped me personally, even before Rylee, is being part of my cause, being part of something bigger. Everybody has a cause. And if you have CMT, I really strongly encourage that individual to get involved and be a part of it.
Probably a good start is to go where? What website?
www.cmtausa.org.
Exactly. That is, just as you referenced, Jeana, a great way to start in terms of resources, right? I'm sure people could reach out to you and you could guide them along the way. People could join a local branch and find out where those branches are. But I guess your point is connect yourself with individuals that either have CMT or know someone with CMT and build a strong community around that. You can have ongoing support and be able to get your questions answered and to carry on and share your stories. Lizzo, unless you have any other questions.
Oh, I have so many
J-Dogger.
other questions. We may have to have Jeana back at some point in time because there are a lot of things we didn't touch upon.
Yeah, I feel like we're just scratching the surface with
just
J-Dogger.
The surface. Yeah.
And but Jeana, thank you. I feel motivated after this podcast. I'm sure our listeners will as well. Keep at it. You're an inspiration for everybody.
Thank you.
And I love Rylee and Haley are great kids with great parents.
Yeah, I've met them too. And nice work with that. Both you and Chris, Jeana.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me on.
You got it. Woohoo! J-Dogger. The weenie.
The weenie.
So, Lizzo, who are we interviewing next?
I'm not telling you.
Oh, so now the tables are turned and now I'm going to be in the suspense mode.
That's right. So deal with it.
Yeah. All right, I will. And Lizzo, as we referenced, and let's say it again, if someone wants to learn more about CMT, where should they go?
www.cmtausa.org. If you want to get involved, join a fundraiser. We're about to do the Cycle for CMT, and that's a year-round thing. So it's cycleforcmt.com.
It takes a lot of money to fund research in order to find a cure for CMT. You just heard from Jay Dogger how important finding that cure is. So if any of our listeners are so inclined to generously donate to our cause, they would just go to cmtausa.org or to cycleforcmt.com.
To our listeners, do you have a good story? Would you like to tell your story on our CMT for Me podcast? If so, we want to hear from you. Write to us, info@cmtausa.org, and pitch your idea. We want to hear from you.
You got it. We sure do. Well, Lizzo, that is awesome. And until next time, folks, adios.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.